Hey there, everybody. Want to give everybody a chance to join in. Hey there, Sheree. Awesome. Hey, everybody. I'm Therese Nelson, back at it again this Friday here on Black Food Folks. Love these conversations on Fridays because they give me a chance to talk to so many amazing people who I've had my eye on for a little while, or who never thought I'd really get a chance to really chat with one on one. And this week we have 2/3 of the brilliant trio from Plantain Papers, which is a New York-based, UK-focused, or UK-made food journal or cultural journal that comes out yearly. Issue 1 has some dope stories all the way from Detroit to London, sort of amazing food photography, and it's elements of the initial issue that just make it a journal you really are going to want to pay attention to. But we have it on because issue 2 is out and available for purchase, and it's going to be really interesting to hear from these ladies about. Hold on a second. Let's see. Hey.
Hello, how are you?
How you doing?
I'm good. I'm so excited to be here with you.
I'm beyond excited. So I'm gonna make sure I have right to hear it.
Yeah, perfect. I,
Hey,
it's a tea morning today, which is fabulous.
that's right. That's right. So I want to say first, I remember, when did the first issue come out?
2017, I want to say, to be
Yep.
difficult if I'm wrong, but yes.
Yep. And I
Yeah,
remember it coming. I remember it coming out and sort of seeing, like, first of all, the name is so catchy because it sort of contextualizes this all black everything, but doesn't have to say the words, and it also
right,
allows you to have this diasporic conversation without before anyone knows what the stories are going to be about. Anything, the imagery and the sort of clarity that the name gives us is brilliant. So it's like, oh dang, what's going on here? But also that you all are British born, that you all are thinking about the diaspora maybe in a different way than we are here in the US is brilliant. And that it's a yearly journal, so that you have a little bit of time to sort of
yeah,
breathe and let it ruminate for a little while was
yeah.
always interesting. So I would love it if you could just start, because your background makes you uniquely prepared to kind of create this kind of journal. And I think that it's interesting. I'm always interested when I'm talking to people who maybe don't have a career focus in food, but see the value of power in food as a
Oh,
vehicle.
yeah. It's like food,
I didn't understand that.
there's not a community. Siri's trying to get involved. I did not invite her to. I hear my laptop trying to respond, like, shh, I'm not talking to you. Yeah, food is like, for every community, regardless of whether they're black or not, it's inherently political, it's inherently social, it's inherently a nucleus point. But just like everything that comes with the black experience, it's even more so for us, right? And so with the name, so there's three of us, myself, Tamika, and Lemara. Lemara came up with the name. Like, she'd been thinking about doing something with plantain, and we're like, well, I say plantain, other people say plantain, Tamika says plantain. So, uh, you know, and we were just so galvanized to build stories around it. So for me, I knew I was a very precocious child, and I knew I wanted to be a writer from when I was very young. So when people would be like, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? I'd be like, I'm already a writer. And I saw that as my power, my superpower for being able to tell our stories, right? And so as a kid, I didn't know how that would manifest. I thought I'd have to be a novelist. Um, then I ended up going to school for journalism, working at the BBC's Black radio output for a little while. And I was like, okay, cool. Maybe it's going to be more in something media related, whether it's radio production or something else. But even then, and then I fell into advertising, which is where I am now. But even then, I was like hyper aware of not fully having the autonomy to give voice to ourselves in the way that I maybe would have wanted to, you know. And so it was always on my mind that like at some point I'd have to create something that truly centers us in all ways, right? I'm really fortunate that in my career I'm at the point now where I have a little bit more influence in the room, so I can push to get us closer to work that centers Black voices, but it's still in service of like, you know, corporate America. So there's like a level in which you can't really, you know. And so for us, we were like, boom, let's tell this really international story about Blackness. Because you have me of Rastafarian Jamaican parents, Tamika of British and Ghanaian heritage, Lemara of Grenadian and Jamaican heritage, and all of us having traveled a lot. I was already living in Portland. So the one thing that I kept realizing is that we could use planting as this really fun, like, nucleus and device for us to talk about food, talk about our cultural experience. But that was the gateway to really just show everyone how connected our experiences are, even if you grew up with like candied yams and not fried plantains, you know, or you grew up with like injera and not like
roti, or
exactly. So you know, so that was what excited us. And even in the very first issue, we, you know, told a story about Detroit that was really centering the Black experience in Detroit and wasn't looking at it through a West African or West Indian lens. We told stories about Sudan, and, you know, it just really allowed us to go, okay, cool. How do we show the beauty and the difference of our experiences, but also the synergy?
The commonality. Yep. I would love it if you could talk a little bit more about your life and like your professional life, because your ability you guys have managed to synthesize what that like intangible quality of that sensory or that commonality is, I think has a lot to do with your storytelling ability, right? Like this sort of seeing how you connect people to story is one of the skills that I think we miss sometimes. I think the conversations around our identity, specifically in the food space, get so muddy so quickly because there isn't sort of that saliency to how you sort of distill stories. And so I don't know, just that your approach to the way you guys choose stories and tell stories is fascinating to me. I think that probably comes certainly from your professional lives as well.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some crossover. So as I was saying before, I was kind of interested in it forever, right? Like how we find a way to tell Black and brown stories and find like the human commonality in it while not distilling our voice or trying to make ourselves palatable, right? And so the first I would say big swing towards that was I lived in Portland like a few years ago, and about a year into getting there, I was kind of like, all right, well, yes, there are a lot of white people here, but there's also an interesting Black community too that is kind of getting pushed to the wayside, right? But the one thing I was yearning for even more was like, I was like, where's the Jamaican spots? Like, so, you know, now there's actually a couple. I think even from, you know, when I was there, there was definitely a storefront that existed that I didn't know about until afterwards. But so I started hosting these Jamaican pop-up experiences where I told stories of my grandma. I called it Gloria's Kitchen, and like cooked 3-course meals and story told as I brought a meal out each time. This is where I learn, Therese, that I have no business like trying to be on the service side of the food industry. I was slow. The food was good. I was just slow. I was like, I don't know what this is. Okay, cool. Oh, this you can't eat this. All right, cool. Well, I've just made a big old batch for everyone. So anyway, I realized that was not my love language. I'm like, I'll cook for friends and family. But what was interesting is I gathered all of these people, many of them, the Black expats and migrants to the city who are like trying to find a little bit of cultural texture in Portland, but a lot of it, there were a lot of white folk as well who were like, oh wow, okay, cool, this is another vessel and way for us to communicate. So I was always searching for different ways to do that in my work. And so even now, I'm a creative director at an advertising agency called 72 and Sunny. And you know, what is integral, as you already know, I'm sure, you know, this audience that we're speaking to already knows, like, we need to be in the room shaping everything and having the conversations, and like, it's just integral making sure that we're there and not just at the other side of like a casting decision, you know?
Yep. Yes.
And I'm like, that's the way you get people to understand that, like, again, there's a human experience that is shared across the board, but you have to allow space for nuances, because for so long we haven't been able to just show the full like diversity and complexity of who we are. We've been treated as a monolith, you know.
Yep. Well, there's something in that as well, right? Like this sort of being, once you get asked a question, right, like this sort of showing up in space fully formed, it requires you then to have your story to tell, right? To be as clear and full-throated about that as possible. And I'm hoping that, like, I love that the way you guys approach the stories you choose to tell. It's like you still like just get out of the way and let the beauty of the image or the beauty of the story sort of be what it is, and don't put, like, it's not a matter of us put our imagination onto what other people's stories should be. It's letting that be fully formed and digesting it however you digest it. It just feels like, I don't know, I mention it because I'm thinking about you guys kind of coming of age or coming up in Britain, and we having this really sort of, we're starting to have much more cross-continental conversations about like what Blackness means or how you show up Black. And I think sometimes we get sort of, we talk it through the lens of being in America, and it's really narrow. And I find the conversations we have with folks who grew up in Britain and sort of think of their Blackness in just a completely different way, it's fascinating. And I wonder if you took talk a little bit about that. I mean, your sort of experience is seeing how Black folks show up in the U.S., what that looks like globally. Like, that's a lot, right? That's a lot to sort of try and put into a journal.
Yeah, totally. Well, so it's interesting. So what is, you know, America, what the United States has always done in terms of its like media influence and stuff, you grow up in Europe, and when you're shaping your own identity of Blackness, we absolutely have things that are our experiences, right? Like, but a lot of the things that we consume are shaped by like the Black American experience of Blackness. So we were listening to reggae and dancehall and like our own hybrids that formed like UK garage and grime and all these things. But we were also listening to hip hop growing up, right? Like, so you're consuming this medley of things, but our identity is like shaped in such an interesting way. Because one thing that I always talk about is when you look at the colonial story of the UK, I'm always like, guys, Great Britain is the mothership of colonialism, right? I'm like, America is the UK's zombie zombie stepchild. So whatever you think, you have to realize that like the UK colonized everywhere. Like,
I swear to God, I was like, I'm hoping you took it there, because I didn't. Yeah.
Oh no, and that's it. And it's like, you know, we're children of colonialism, and it's like the reason my ancestors hit the Caribbean is the same reason why your ancestors are here, you know. So it's like that foundation isn't actually that different. And so even when you think about like the story, though, the migration story that happened was, of course, England enslaved a ton of people in a ton of different islands, and then wreaked havoc in India, in Africa, in all of these places. And then we're like, hey, we've got a commonwealth. Now we're going to give you guys independence, like after World War II in the 50s. It was like, we're going to give you independence, so we're going to leave your countries in chaos, but we're going to, you know, invite you guys to come to the UK and basically help us clean it up.
Mm-hmm.
The first wave of Black and brown people who got to the UK, like, they couldn't rent places. They were, you know, if they tried to get accommodation, it said like no blacks, no dogs on the door. You know, it was like, and so this experience, that same level of adversity, white supremacy is white supremacy no matter where you are, right? And having to find your own, like, the nucleus of your own identity beyond what it means to be other is a challenge that is universal across the West, right? So whether you are a Black person who's grown up in Amsterdam or the UK or like South Carolina, like, you still need to figure out what your cultural compass is, with, you know, in addition to being othered. Like, even when I think about myself and Tamika both live on the West Coast, and, you know, we're both very British, but there's a glass ceiling that exists in the UK that, like, I probably wouldn't be career-wise where I am right now if I, because there's this real insidious, even a city that's super, like, London is mad diverse, right? The UK is not. It's like 3% Black. So,
yeah.
But London is like 50% minorities. So when you look at it through that lens, knowing that even still those, like, systemic infrastructures are absolutely still there, but it's all very polite and clandestine. So, you know, even when you looked at like the very necessary racial uprising this year, it's the reason why places in Europe were also protesting. It's why in Bristol, which is a slave port in the UK, that statue got pulled down of the slaver, that they, you know, because everyone is still like confronting these things that, again, you know, across the board, we're talking about like systemic white racism and white supremacy is not an experience unique to Black Americans.
That's right.
It's unique to the it's the Black experience, kind of, even in places that are majority Black, you know, because they're governed by the tentacles of colonization.
No, 1,000,000%. Well, because I wanted to sort of, I'm so thankful that you went there, because we talked to Keanu Moju from Jaconi Kitchen last week, and she had gone to she had done her, I think, her graduate studies in London at College of the Arts or University of the Arts.
Mm-hmm.
But she was talking about her time there, and was thinking about, she was sort of saying that she felt she felt there was a ownership of specific identity in the UK that sometimes we don't have in the US, where we sort of make this homogenous Blackness, and there is such a particularity and kind of a clarity and specificity about the specific cultures from which you come, that she found refreshing. And I think that sort of talks to your point about the like the nature of, it just feels like when I hear you all talk about how vibrant and how like the necessity, the vibrancy of your Blackness in an environment that is so
Yes.
racist,
Yes.
like it's almost a refuge that I think we
Yes.
take for granted here sometimes.
Yeah. And it's a little bit like a act of revolution. I will say that
Yeah,
we're really in a time where that's finally becoming less divisive than it used to be, because
yes,
it's true. Because even in the experience growing up in the UK, like I grew up I went to school in a very Caribbean neighborhood. I grew up in a very West African neighborhood, right? And you could feel the like, there was a little bit of like separatism that just wasn't cool. Yeah, we were all black kids, but it's like, you know, Nigerian against Jamaican against whatever, you know. Um, and I think now, thankfully, by and large, these silly diaspora wars are kind of going away. I think even when we look at the magazine, that's a vessel for us to speak to that. And like, we often make jokes about the fact that like Tamika says plantain, and I say plantain because that's the way my family says it. So yeah, it's just there's a lot of strength in understanding, like, because one thing that drives me nuts as well, looking at diaspora wars in like a bigger sense, like sometimes I hear even the inference that like African Americans lack culture, and that blows. I'm like, how dare you? How bloody dare you even insinuate? I'm like, again, yes, there's like this tapestry that connects us all in that, like, you know, someone's fifth ward is someone else's like project, or someone's like, you know, there's different names and different ways to show up, but everyone has a heritage that they have built, they've had to build, they fought to build, you know. So yeah, I think for us it's just figuring out how to tell that story. So even in issue 2, this wonderful like activist and documentarian really, Mikey Cordero, wrote about the Black Puerto Rican experience. And like, in a similar way, there was something that you said earlier around like, you know, understanding these different experiences and not treating them all as like one monolith, knowing that like I don't have intimate understanding of the Black experience in LATAM, but knowing that it isn't spoken about enough, there was no way I was going to over edit his piece. It's like, hey, you do this, you take this, you tell us what this experience is. And that's what we try to do all the way through. It's like, how do we empower everyone to like really give us an insight? And, you know, we'll go through and pick up on typos and neaten up syntax. But other than that, like, you know, and if they can throw some food in the story, then yes.
Tahirah, I could talk to you forever. I want to be respectful of your time. I know you have to jump off at some point. Again, I want to make sure we like put it at a point where like Tamika can jump in and like pick up.
Yeah.
But like, I think you guys are so freaking brilliant. I cannot wait to get my hands on my copy of issue 2. Like, excuse me. There's so many just brilliant things about it. It's so freaking dope.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm so humbled, and you are incredible. Like, what a fun way. This is a joy to play hooky a little bit from my morning meetings and do something so much more important. This was so dope.
All right, so I'm gonna extra out, and hopefully Tamika is with us and will jump in. But I'm gonna vamp for a minute, and then hopefully see her jump in a minute.
All right, perfect. That sounds great.
All right. Talk to you soon.
All right, bye.
Okay, y'all. So Tahirah is clearly brilliant. I'm gonna give her a second, and Tamika is gonna jump in to pick up. These ladies are a trio, so we are getting to talk to 2/3 of this very brilliant trio. Let's see.
Hello,
Hey.
hello. How are you?
I'm doing so good. How are you doing?
good today. Do you know how much of a delight you've given me? I love seeing Tahirah speak. I love it. What a lovely
Really,
way to
really,
start my morning.
I love it. I'm so thankful for you guys taking the time. I know you all are, busy at work, and sort of I think we sort of discount a lot of times that folks have like daytime jobs, but to jump in and be able to have this conversation is so brilliant. I don't know how much of the previous 20 minutes you heard, but I remember when you guys came out in 17 and just how striking the imagery and sort of the conceit of what you guys are trying to do was. Certainly thinking about hearing from folks who had upbringing in the UK and just sort of what that perspective was going to feel like or look like was definitely sort of it was going to be interesting to see, and to know you guys have carried on and sort of come into a second edition is so cool to see.
Thank you.
So here, talk to us a little bit about like sort of how you all like. I think you guys like the X-Men, right? You all have your own superpowers to bring to your collective, but you all really do think of your team as a collective, right? Like you all call yourselves Fire and Chiefs. Like there's sort of everybody has their own sort of gift to sort of give to the collective, and so you talked to her a little bit about her storytelling and her writing and just sort of how she always wanted to exist in that lane. But like I think of your work, especially as like anthropologist and like your sort of like the context of culture that you sort of bring to the team is so critical right now more than ever, really. And so I would love if you could just talk a little bit about how you kind of like what you kind of in the beginning days when you all were thinking of the name and kind of coming up with this format, what those conversations were like and what you sort of brought to the team.
Yeah, of course. And I think a bit of context for me is that I've never really had a real job. I've never had an official job. I've never done a job interview. I have never taken part in a role that was already set out for me. I've always helped people grow businesses and understand what's going on in the world outside them. So I feel like I come from a very like fluid, ambiguous place where I'm like, here's the thing, there's one thread that I've had through my whole life, and it's I have a deep like love and admiration for people, but at a very individual level. I tend to get quite overwhelmed by like the structural and all of those things are important, but I think every single thing that you do in your life it boils down to a relationship, right? And for Plantain Papers, yes, there are 3 co-friars in chief, and it's as much as about the plantain as it is about the people. We wanted to create something that shone a light on, firstly, a delicious, peng, dynamic, beautiful fruit, which we grew up with and we can't live without. But it's also about how it weaves between different cultures and experiences. And we couldn't do what we do. Plantain Papers is not Plantain Papers without the community that we've created. It's not 3 of us that are doing the work at all. It's just being able to see someone and spot someone and say, yo, you've got a story to tell. I'm not a storyteller at all. I can barely string a sentence together. But what I can do is I can see the light in someone and I can help them see the light in themselves. I'm a set builder. I'm not the performer in the middle of the stage by any means, but I think the world that we're looking to create now, we can only create if we co-imagine together, right? Reality is based around our imagination, and there's been a massive colonization of our imagination, of the things that we think are possible. So the 3 of us got together back when Lemara was living in Brooklyn, in Gowanus. And yeah, we sat down and we had a bit of imposter syndrome. We said, we've never created a publication before. But I know that Tahirah is an incredible creative director, has been a writer for her whole life. Lemara worked in insights and foresights and futures and research like I did. Also an incredible writer. And then I explore the world for fun, you know? So it's like we've got something, the three of us have got something together, but we can't do it without elevating and uplifting like individual stories. So yeah, I just think we didn't put any limits on ourselves, you know, at the start of the journey, and we understood that there was a huge canon of amazing Black and brown independent publications that already existed, and we wanted to be a part of that ecosystem.
Well, that's the other part, right, that I love so much about the framework you guys have sort of set up, because it's like that point alone of seeing the ability to be part of something as opposed to thinking that you have to sort of be in competition with. Also, sort of the way you all approach storytelling is unique, right? So we need the most idealized version is that we get to a place where we got 20 publications that are all telling, because there's so many stories to tell. Like, I think we discount the fact that there is so much work to do. Like, we need folks who are creating their own communities that allow for people to be fully formed, just to show up fully into whatever space that is. The stories that exist for Plantain Papers are so aesthetically particular and so crystal clear about the community that they existed, that they couldn't exist in any other publication. They would have to exist in the sort of home that you all have created.
Do you know what? It's a really good point, and there's two things that what you've said has made me think of, and the first one is the importance of understanding an ecosystem of change, right? Especially in 2020, because I think we've all felt it with this, like the racial like upright. We've felt it, we've known it, we've talked about it for years. It's like, okay, everyone else has woken up now, and we've got people that are seeing it as a rallying cry. Black Lives Matter is a rallying cry. It's not a slogan, it is a call to action, and we need our accomplices and allies and people that are really like willing to ride or die to get on board. But in terms of creating change, like, I think the only way that we're gonna fully build a world that we are proud of is to know your role and to play it really, really well. Don't do the most. Do not do the absolute most. Like, what is it? Don't make your 4s, 5s and 6s. What's your 7? What's your 8? And how can you make that, you know, how can you strengthen that? So I think I understand, and we all understand Plantain Papers as one part of a larger sort of movement to elevate and actually give more visibility to lots of different Black experiences. We're talking Caribbean, we're talking Black American, we're talking African American, we're talking Afro Latinx, we're talking all of the things. And I think this year especially, the rhetoric around the Black community for me has been it feels quite surface level, you know? And I think Plantain Papers is a space where we can make sure that your story is your story, right? Each individual has a very, very different lens and way that they look at the world, and Plantain Papers within the pages, we want to be able to celebrate that. So as Tahirah was saying before, we do minimum edits, you know, we're doing typos, we're making sure that the flow works, but your words are your words. If you speak colloquially, 100% that's going in. If you speak in slang, that is like, yeah. So yeah, it's a place where your words are welcome.
I love that. There's something I also loved, like the beginning. Like, I haven't seen issue 2, and I feel like are you coming out with issue 3, or issue 2 is the one that's like right now?
It's cooking. So we've got issue 1, we've got issue 2, and there's a story around issue now 3, which was initially issue 2.5. So we got to a place early this year. So in January, we had a whole theme for our issue 3. And we were curating stories from around the globe on that theme. Of course, March came around and COVID-19 happened, and we were beginning to understand the implications of that. And we were trying to understand what the timeline of our lives, quote unquote, returning to normal might be. So we were powering on as usual. We were trying to get funding because we kickstarted our last issue. So we were trying to get funding, and we were powering along, and it got to a place in May, I think April, May time, when the rallying cries for Black Lives Matter were getting a lot louder, and we realised that COVID-19 and us not having social interaction with other people, and us not being able to create community in physical spaces, it was going to be our lives for a while. So like, yo, we've got to switch tact. And as someone that has never had a proper job, or a job with a job description, where I've made up roles for myself, I think that was a real moment of like catalysm and like galvanization for me. I was like, oh, y'all got to get a bit comfortable. And I'm talking about y'all as in us. We were getting comfortable. We were like, okay, we're just going to keep going. And if Plantain Papers is a preservation of our history, it needs to represent what's going on right now. So we started to think about issue 3 as being an interim and a 2.5 edition. So Plantain Papers is always in real life. It's always printed. It's always tangible and something that you can hold and feel and cherish and archive, you know, because our stories are worth that. Our stories are worth the paper. They are worth the time. They are worth the physicality and the work and the love that goes into that. But this year it was like, yo, there's no money for the arts. No one's giving us any coin. We've got full-time jobs. We got no coin to do this. We're like, let's release a digital edition. We need community now more than ever. Let's create an open submission around the word still. And the word still came to mind. Like it was such an organic sort of theme to come up for edition 3. We were talking about it as like an adjective. It's quiet, it's undisturbed, it's gentle, it's about calm, it's deep silence, it's about nevertheless. In London, I use the word still to pepper all of my conversations. At the end of a sentence, I'm like, still. It's just it's a static, it's ordinary. It's like, still, these things aren't going to change. No matter if the world is chaos around us, do you know what? We've still got each other. We're still here. We can still lean on each other. This is it. This is it, because that's the story of Blackness everywhere. You've tried to deceive me into thinking that I'm not magic and my community is not magic. You think a little COVID-19 is going to come and done off the thing? No, we just need to pivot. So it was a really exciting, galvanizing moment for us, and one in which it's been our most communal and most community based offering so far. And honestly, I think I'm really excited about this issue. I'm really, really excited. And we made the decision collectively 2 weeks ago we're like, you know what, I think it needs to be physical. There's so much beautiful work in this, and people have shared really intimate parts of their life this year with us, and it's much more interdisciplinary. So we focused on words and storytelling through language a lot in the last 2 issues. But you know, this issue it's made us open our minds, and we're able to see that we can tell stories in an interdisciplinary way. Some people talk really well. Some people make art really well. Some people use their body to convey their stories. It's like, okay, cool. So we've got music in there. We've got people talking in there. We've got writing in there. We've got art in there. And it's almost like a modicum of, it's like a microcosm of like a museum, right? What you might see in an exhibition. And for me personally, that's something that I really miss. So it feels really playful, the next issue, and it's coming out in the next couple of weeks. So yeah, we're going to drop that on the IG soon. But yeah, this is our 3rd issue, and honestly, I can't wait to see how it evolves, you know, in the future, because the world's changing rapidly outside our doors, and we got to react to that, you know, and almost preempt it.
So I ordered the second edition because I hadn't gotten it yet. But one of the things I wanted is there's something about the first one that I was struck by and has sat with me since it came out was the in the opening page you leave room for people to name the issue. Like I think it's sort of once they digest it, what this issue was really about for them, and there's something really beautiful about that idea of sort of adding that element of personality to the thing that is you're talking about static. I wonder if you could talk about that decision if it's in the second edition as well. Do you leave the room in the second volume as well? But just talk about that a little bit because it's such a particular and like beautiful little touch that you would maybe miss, but is something that is so unique to what you guys do.
Do you know what? Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for noticing that detail. That really means a lot to me. Thank you. It was very intentional, and it's part of what I was saying earlier about, it's me, it's Tahirah, it's Lemara who are working behind the scenes and are creating the structures and the architecture to help other people flourish, or to allow other people, not even help, that's not the right words, but to allow other people to flourish. It is an unfinished document. It doesn't, it's not a coffee table book. It's not something that you read one time and we're hoping for you to leave it there and think, oh, well, that was a nice archive of, you know, Plantain papers in whatever year. It's there for you to play with and think about and experiment. And it's not, we don't want to be precious with it at all. It's not a static document. It is something that we want our community to engage with. And I absolutely love it in any moment where people are like, hey, I read that thing and here's the thing that I took away from it. Or even like criticism, like I love like constructive criticism as well. So when people are like, oh, it's really interesting that you spoke about this, but for the next issue, like I would love to see more stories from why. Gorgeous. This is our work together. It's not just me, Tahirah and Lemara doing the work. And I think, the intentional leaving the theme sort of in the open for people to play. It's the way that the world works, right? You don't get, we'll give you a blueprint, like you figure it out yourself because you're a smart audience and you've got your own experiences and lenses and perspectives that we probably can't even see. And that's the beauty of like co-imagination. I really think that, I'm not interested in having ownership of anything. If anything, I'm interested in creating blueprints for people to run away and take. I'd love if in 10 years, if Plantain Papers, for example, is no longer a journal. What if it is a school? What if it is teaching people how to create their own publications? What about if it is a community building organization? Like the possibilities are endless when we all work together. And again, back to the ecosystem point, is you've got to transform yourself and you've got to know yourself deeply in order to transform the communities and society and the world around you. So yes, it's very intentional, but all of that to say, for edition 2.5/3, we have got a theme because we went out to, it was very open sourced, and we needed to give some people like a piñata to bash down and experiment with. So not this time, although, you know, we're very open to reinterpretation because we've had conversations between ourselves around how still this year has really been, you know, the illusion of having more stillness, more time, more calm, more introspection, when 2020 has also not been very still. It's frenetic and it's chaotic, and you know, we're all working and living and trying to play the roles that we play in our everyday lives through a global pandemic. So you know. I'm so open to people saying, you know, I took this issue and the thing was still, but the thing that I got out of it was not stillness, it was chaos, or, you know.
Yeah.
It's a work in
Y'all, yeah, I love that's there's so many takeaways from this that I'm going to be sitting with for a minute, but that's one of the ones I'm definitely going to be thinking a lot about. Y'all, we've been talking to 2/3 of the brilliant collective from Plantain Papers. I've been talking this segment with Tamika Abaka-Wood, who is anthropologist, seer of the world, traveler, just brilliant mind. And if y'all have any questions, we want to be respectful of Tamika's time. So we're going to be trying to close this up in the next 10 minutes or so. But if you have any questions, you can drop them in the comments or in the question bar. I love that you guys have another issue coming out, because I've been wanting to sort of consume more. There's something I want to sort of circle around to, or sort of comment on, because the point you just made is so interesting. This notion of, and I think maybe we could talk, you could probably talk about it through the lens of like the stories that are going to come out in this next issue. But your point about, I've been sitting with this for a little while, and it's something I've been talking to a couple people about, because this idea of what COVID has sort of meant for folks, there's a privilege in that. Like, stillness is so interesting to me. Like, this idea of folks who've had the privilege of being still right now, and it's sort of recognizing that privilege and like not having it be the only story we talk about, because there are so many people who have not had. This has not been a time of sort of respite for everybody, right? And I think something about, especially when we talk about the food space, the way we think about sort of framing of essential workers, or the sort of essential nature of the food space in general, it's sort of, it always feels separate from the way we craft narrative around this moment as this time of like reflection and all these amazing things that people have been able to take out of it. But it also then goes back to the way in which Black people always have to sort of navigate terrible situations. So we have to sort of find the silver line, the good parts, your joyfulness out of every situation, as opposed to just having a room to really sit with just full joy. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the stories that you've gotten, because I would imagine that, like, to your point about the kind of co-creation process, especially of a digital, like a pivot to digital, like the kinds of stories that you get, and how do you sort of decide which ones are most important? How do you make those kinds of determinations when I'm sure you are being bombarded with a lot of energy and like a lot of different kinds of stories?
Do you know what? It's a great it's a great conversation starter, because I think the thing that this year has taught me personally is the fact that personhood is not a new thing. It is just shown me that each individual is an individual. I think we can slip into groupthink so easily, and I think it is one of the most dangerous and vitriolic ways that we can think about people and the way that people organize themselves. There's been white supremacy, right? It's come from someone's imagination. It's come from groupthink, and reality was based on that set of imaginations, right? But this year has taught me that no one's going through the same COVID-19. There's no such thing. We're all having such intimate individual experiences, and I think that's been reflected in the submissions that we've gotten this year. And I think Tahirah, Lemara and I always take a lot of care with the work that comes in, but I mean this year especially, and I saw Andre from Authors of the Estate pop up, but he talks a lot about heart work, right? He's like, yeah, you can work and work and work and work, but when you're working to sort of like your true purpose, it comes from a place of your heart. Like, there's a piece of your soul that is in that work. And this year especially, like, I feel like we've had the full spectrum of human emotion poured into this issue. Whereas before, to be perfectly frank, and I think we're all guilty of this, we were operating with our analytical minds so much. And I think this year has taught us all to be more sensual. And I'm not talking about like seedy. I'm not trying to be seedy here. I'm not, although, but
I mean,
yeah, but it's also, yeah, it's taught us to think with more than one sense or more than like one part of our brain. So the work that we're getting in feels much more like emotional. We've got a lot of poetry in. We've had photo essays. We've had people interviewing different generations of their family. Yeah, we've had people that have realized that, you know, maybe their forte is not words and language, but it is music. So I'm going to communicate in that way. We've had, it feels like a real like purity of thought. Because this year, I think the one thing that a lot of us have had to do more so that we haven't before is bear witness to ourselves. Whenever do you get, when do you get the chance, the opportunity, or sometimes just the sheer, like, it's exhausting. Sometimes I don't want to bear witness to myself, but we've had a lot of noise and white noise taken away from our lives, and we've had to kind of notice patterns and notice, like, this is the life that I'm creating. Is this what I'm trying to do? So it feels like there's a lot more like purity of thought. It's like people are creating for themselves. I think that people are creating with them as the audience, with them as the witness to their work. So it feels more truthful. It feels a lot more pure. It feels as though this is my truth. It deserves space. It deserves to be remembered. This is my history. I want to archive it. It is my own. I don't really care what y'all think, but this is more of a cathartic process for me. And again, like, to use that same phrase, and this was taken from Adrienne Marie Brown, who has written the book Emergent Strategy. And there's one line that she says throughout the whole book, and it's transform yourself to transform the world. And it feels like we're starting it here, and people are like, no, I have value, I'm important, and yeah, this work that I'm putting out there is primarily for me.
Yeah, I think that it's, I swear, like, it sounds so simple, but I think that what you point out is that it's one of those things that you really do have to come to. And I think it's also something that I'm finding fascinating to watch people evolve into, right? Like, it's so easy to sort of assume that's where everyone is sort of deferring from or sort of starting from, but it really isn't. And you sort of watch the health of our sort of collective community, and sort of see it's kind of not, right? Like, the sort of the permission to center yourself, the sense of who you are first, and sort of believe in it enough to have it be valuable and central to how you move through the world. With even if no one's, especially when no one's watching, right?
Exactly.
It's sort of, yeah.
That's a great question. That is such a great question. Like, who are you when no one else is watching? And I know it's so ironic that we're saying this on Instagram Live right now, but I mean, these are the conversations that people are having offline.
Yes, but I think that the power of what you guys, especially even what Tahirah talked about earlier, but what you certainly have lifted up is like the power of the community you build, even if it's small, even if it's insular, even if it has a very particular lane. It's your point about ecosystem becomes critical, right? Because the visibility of a different way of seeing yourself, of telling stories, of sort of showing up in the world, I think it gives people permission to do it for themselves, right? Like, you hadn't considered that maybe I am hiding behind affectation. Maybe I am not showing up fully. Maybe I'm not. And I think, and just, I love that your work is not, you use Plantain as a vehicle, and so I think a lot of times our audience is a lot of culinary folks, or sort of food folks, and I think sometimes it's very easy to get distracted in the food world professionally with a lot of nonsense that has nothing to do with anything that's going to be really valuable to us in our souls. Like we get sort of distracted by the ways in which we think the industry, or we're supposed to move through this industry. And I think watching or sort of having publications like yours that show us better best practices will it just inform us in much more interesting ways. I think that the stories you guys are telling, the way you all are reminding us to love our whole selves and to sort of see ourselves more globally that's the whole thing. That's the whole ball game. It's what's going to matter, to your point, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. Like, these are the stories that are going to matter.
Absolutely. I think it's such a great point. It's such a good point. And I was very wary, like we were all very wary of the fact our tagline is people with a side of plantain. Plantain is the vehicle in which we ask people to think about their stories and their personal histories and their culture and their heritage. But what you've just given me, and thank you, is you can get so stuck in your industry, but don't stay stuck in that banner. It's like, okay, cool. So what is this going to allow me to like unlock, like big, bold, audacious, like world building stuff? Like, what can food allow me to do? What can telling stories allow me to do? You know? I know this. I want to talk to you all the time. When can we do it again? Can we be friends?
Yes, absolutely. I think I'm so impacted by you all. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you guys sort of sharing with us. Like, you all need to go over, please. You can follow Plantain Papers here on Instagram, which you need to do immediately if you're not already. But also go to plantainpapers.com, because you're going to be able to get your back issue of issue 2. You're going to get all the updates for when 2.5 or issue 3 drops. And then when we can also the merch, like on side note, like I'm like the bags and like I'm gonna get my Plantain Papers bag immediately, but just this sort of, it feels like a movement. It feels like a sort of an attitude. And it just, I think it's to be reminded that Blackness is dope. Like, we don't have to defer to anybody else. We have so many stories, and like you guys are doing this really critical soul work of letting people tell their stories, which is, I'm sure you know, it's not easy, but it's the work we need, right? It's the work that's going to change the game for us all. So we just appreciate y'all.
I appreciate you so much. Thank you, Black Food folks.
Yeah, alrighty. Talk to you soon.
Take care of yourself.
Those girls are so brilliant. So we didn't get to have them on, but please follow them here. These women are freaking powerhouses, brilliant storytellers. The collective is so brilliant. So just go buy issue 2. I'm trying to get like my hands on a back issue of issue 1. But stay current, because they got so much cool stuff coming out. Issue 3 is on the way, and they're just so smart. You want to pay attention. So, alrighty, I will talk to you guys next week. And yeah, thanks for watching.